Okay, so here is day one of homework, or I guess we could call it a little extra practice, since it's not really assigned for homework. However, what I did is I wrote down each of the problems, and if you notice at the top of my page here, I said starred problems are challenging. These ones, let's see, 5, 9, and 10 are going to be a little bit more involved than some of the other problems, but nothing we can't handle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to do each of these. I have to figure out how I'm going to hold my phone first. Here we go. Okay, so if I have the square root of 3 over the square root of 2, I know that I can't have a square root on the bottom, so I'm going to multiply by that square root, and I'm going to multiply across, and on the top I'm going to have 3 times 2, which gives me the square root of 6. And because 3 and 2 don't break up into anything other than 1 in itself, like 1 times 3 and 1 times 2, I know that 6 is my final answer on the top. And on the bottom, this is the same thing as the square root of 2 times 2. When I have two numbers that are the same, they cancel out, and that number moves outside of the square root. This is also like having the square root of 4, because 2 times 2 equals 4. The square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. And the number that when multiplied by that same number is 2. So therefore, when you have a pair, that number moves outside of the square root and reduces to just a 2. Sorry if that was a little bit confusing, but hopefully it makes sense. That's our final answer. All right, moving to the next one. Again, can't have a square root on the bottom, so we're going to multiply by that same number on the bottom, and what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply across now, and I've got 5 root 5. Now the reason I'm multiplying 5 times the square root of 5 and not combining them together is because this 5 is outside of the square root, and this one is inside. They're not like terms, kind of like apples and oranges. You can't put them in the same basket to sell because they're not the same fruit. So same thing here, they're not like terms. 5 is not the same thing as the square root of 5. Down below here on the bottom, I have the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. Those two are the same. So when I put them both under the square root, I've got 5 times 5. There's a pair, that cancels out, and it turns into just a 5. So therefore, I've got 5 root 5 divided by 5, but these also cancel out. So now I'm just left with the square root of 5. Not too bad. There's my final answer. Same thing with this one right here. We are going to multiply by the square root on the bottom. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. I'm going to multiply across here. And just like up here, I have 2 times 3, which gives me the square root of 6. Again, just like what I did here. And top is done. Let's look at the bottom. Divided by the square root of 3 times 3. Two numbers that are the same cancel out and move out to the front. So I am left with a 3 here. Now remember, I could cancel here. Wait, where was it? Here it is. I could cancel here because these were both outside of the square root. Here, there's not another 3 outside the square root, so I can't cancel anything out. So this is my final answer. Over here for number 4, I have to get rid of that 5 under the square root on the bottom, and if I do it on the bottom, I do it on the top. I'm going to multiply across. So again, these are not like terms. This one is not under the square root. So I am left with negative 4. Oopsies. I'm left with negative 4 root 5 divided by the square root of 5 times 5. And when I have two numbers that are the same, it cancels out, moves out to the front. So now my final answer is negative 4 root 5 over 5. And 4 and 5 they don't reduce, so you can't cancel them out. And you are done. Moving on to number 5. Ooh, 5's a challenge problem. Again, nothing we can't handle. So there we go, and it's back in focus. I have to get rid of whatever I have on the bottom that's under a square root. Since it's just the square root of 6, I'm just going to get rid of the square root of 6. If I do that on the bottom, I'm doing that on the top also. So now I just need to multiply going across, and I have a 3 outside the square root, but I have 3 and a 6 under the square root. And then here I have 4 root 6 times root 6, so 4 stays on the outside, and I've got 6 times 6. Oop, two numbers that are the same. That cancels out and moves to the outside. When I do that, I have to multiply these two numbers together, and let's see what we can get on the top here. I have 3 times 6, so 3 times 6 is the same thing as, oop, probably should switch this over. 3 times 6 is what, 18? And 18 breaks up into 9 and 3, and 9 breaks up into 3 times 3. So I've got a 3, a 3, a 3. So I've got 3 root 3 times 3 times 3. Hopefully this is making sense. Two numbers that are the same cancel out and hop outside the square root. So now I have 3 times 3 out here. So I've got 9 root 3 because I have this 3 left under the square root. These ones moved outside. Multiplied those two numbers together to get me my 9, and 3 stays the same. So that's the top. Don't forget about the bottom. So down here, I took my pair of 6s and it moved to the outside. So then I had a 6 out here. Those go away. I'm left with 6 times 4. 6 times 4 is 24. Now I need to look to see if I can simplify, which I can. So 9 is the same thing as 3 times 3. And 24 is the same thing as 3 times 8. Two numbers that are the same, 3's, they cancel out. So I am left with, remember 9 goes away because it broke up into 3 and 3. 24 goes away because it broke up into 3 and 8. And I'm left with the 3 on top. Square root of 3 divided by 8. And this does not reduce any further. So that's our final answer. A little tricky. A little bit more involved. Whew, let's go back to an easy one. So now I have to get rid of my 2 on the bottom. I'm going to rationalize my denominator. So I'm going to multiply by the square root on the bottom and the top, because when I do that, it gets rid of that square root on the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to multiply going across, and I have 3 root 2 divided by the square root of 2 times 2. I have two numbers that are the same, so they're going to hop outside, and the 2's cancel out. Now I'm left with 3 square root of 2 divided by 2. There's my final answer. Ooh, we like the easy ones. Okay, number 7, moving on. Pretty much the same as the other easy ones. Again, just getting rid of the square root on the bottom. And what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So now I'm going to multiply across, and I've got the square root of 12. So you could either leave this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, and then break this up into 2 and 2, and then this one would just be simplified. Or you can do it over here. We've got 4 times 3 is 12. 3 stays the same, and 4 breaks up into 2 times 2. It doesn't matter if you leave it like that or if you do this. Everybody reduces different, so whatever works best for you. I'm okay with that. So like moving along here, let's do the top first so I don't get you confused. I know my phone's a little wobbly because I'm holding it with my hand. So I have the square root of 12. That is 2 times 2 times 3. Ooh, two numbers that are the same. Cross out, move to the front. And now I'm left with 2 square root 3 divided by whatever we got on the bottom here. And on the bottom, I've got 3 times 3. Two numbers that are the same, cancel out, move to the front, 3. So I can go back over here and put my 3. There's my final answer. That one was a little bit tricky because I feel like we had a couple of steps in here and didn't have as many on the bottom, but that's okay. Let's move on to number 8. Ooh, 9 and 10. Those ones are going to be a little bit more work. Okay, there we go. Now we can see. Let's look here, and we've got the square root of 3 and the square root of 3, because what we do on the bottom, we have to do the top, and the reason why we're multiplying by the square root of 3 is to rationalize our denominator. We have to get rid of that number under the square root on the bottom. Can't have square roots on the bottom. So I'm going to multiply across on the top first, and I have negative 3 root 3. Remember, you cannot combine those. They're not like terms, so that negative 3 has to stay outside the square root. Divided by 3 times 3, and two numbers that are the same. That number hops outside our square root, and now I'm left with negative 3, the square root of 3, divided by 3. Ooh, two numbers that are the same. They cancel out. So now I'm left with, okay, you could either do 3 times 1 and 3 times 1 here, and those two are the same, but 1 divided by 1, even though it's negative, still gives you a negative 1. And you could either leave it or write it as negative 1 root 3, or you could leave your final answer as negative root 3. Both are the same. And that's it. Okay, moving on to number 9. Let's see. Ooh, this actually isn't so bad. Neither is 10. Look, we have two numbers that are the same on the top and bottom. Those cancel out, and those cancel out. Who would have thought we'd be doing 9 and 10 at the same time? All right, so looking at number 9 here, we got to get rid of that 15 on the bottom. So square root of 15, square root of 15. Oh, yucky, this is going to be a little bit of work. That's okay. I am going to leave the top as 12 times 15 because they're both under the square root, and I don't want to try and figure that out in my head because why make it more complicated than we have to? This is the same as 3 times 4. 3 is done. 4 is the same as 2 times 2. 4 is done. And now 15 is the same as 3 times 5, and 3 and 5 don't reduce any further. So now I have, let's scoot your phone over a little bit. We've got 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. So I like to put my numbers together that are the same because when I do that, it makes the pairs way easier. I have a pair of 2s, and that hops outside and cancels out. And I have a pair of 3s, which cancels out and hops outside. So now I have 3 times 2, which equals 6, and I have a 5 left under that square root, so I've got a 5 here. And now I got to go back to the bottom, figure the bottom out. So I have root 15 times the square root of 15. So I'm going to multiply across here and whoop, just draw a little bitty arrow to show where our work is traveling to. And we've got the square root of 15 times the square root of 15. Let's extend that square root. Two numbers that are the same. It hops outside and cancels out. And we're left with 15. Now, I can't simplify. Oh, I can. Yes, I can. Whew, no wonder it's a challenge problem. Ah, star. Okay, so I didn't think I could cancel those out. However, I can take 6, and I know that 2 times 3 is 6, and I know that 15 is 3 times 5. Two numbers that are the same cancel out, and I'm left with 2 square root 5 divided by 5. There is my final answer. Whew, that one was a little bit more work. All right. Again, nothing we can't handle. So let's go ahead and do this last one here. So I have the square root of 12 on the bottom, so I need to multiply by that square root of 12 on the bottom here, and whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So I can, let me hear you say it, multiply across. Yep, you got it. So I'm going to do the square root of 8 times the square root of 12 divided by, the square root of 12 times the square root of 12. I can do this. Two numbers that are the same. That cancels out and hops outside that square root. Now you might ask, like, why am I doing the bottom before I do the top? It doesn't matter which one I do first. I just saw right away that there was a pair here, so I decided to simplify that pair. I could have totally done that up here with this guy when I had this problem in the beginning. I just chose to work on the top first, going across. So whichever way works best for you, go ahead and do that. So now I know that I have the square root of 8 times 12. So just so I remember, I have a 12 left on the bottom here. And because 8 times 12 gives me a big number, I'm going to leave these numbers the way they are. So I'm just going to break them down a little bit further. 2 is done. 4 breaks up into 2 times 2. And then 12, you can either break that up into 2 and 6, and then 6 breaks up into 2 and 3, or you can multiply it by 3 times 4, and 4 breaks up into 2 times 2. You'll get the same answer. Doesn't matter which way you break it up. So some people might do the 2 times 6 equals 12. Some people choose to do 3 times 4. Either way, we're on the top. Okay, so the bottom number was a 12 because we got that from here when it hopped outside. Let me zoom out a little bit. There we go. So my 12 stays on the bottom, and on the top I've got 2 times 2 times 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoop, times 3. Yeah. Okay, so now I can circle my pairs. I have a pair of 2s. That cancels out and moves outside. 2. Now I got another pair here. That's going to cancel out and move outside that square root. Bing! Another 2. 2 times 2 equals 4. Square root. And I have 2 times 3 left under the square root. They don't have a pair, so they stay under the square root, and I'm left with 12. Not done yet, guys. Almost there. I can simplify. That's our favorite part. All right, let's cut it in half. Half of 4 is 2, and half of 12 is 6. Ooh, can I cut those guys in half? Yes, I can. Half of 2 is 1, and half of 6 is 3. So now, this darn paper is all crumpled. I'm going to write my final answer over here. And I've got 1 root 6 divided by 3. That is my final answer, guys. Whew, and we are done. That took almost 20 minutes to do 10 problems. All right, not bad. 2 minutes per problem on the average. We got this. Look at that. So that's some serious work. You can also see how these ones started out with less work and then eventually got to be more and more and more and more and more. But overall, we did a great job. Again, keep with it. We got this. And again, this was day 1 for Tuesday. What's the date tomorrow? Tomorrow's the 17th. So just to give you a little refresher of what we did today, we had, where's my camera? We had our warm-ups. We went through our notes, talking about radicals. And we had some U-tries. And tomorrow we're going to start with the Pythagorean theorem. Woo! We love it. Great job, guys. See you tomorrow.